Welcome. Today we are going to dive into the physics of airborne pathogens with an interdisciplinary approach. Airborne pathogens have classically been studied within the fields of biology and public health. However, the movement, survival, and interactions of these pathogens in the air are fundamentally dictated by physical forces and phenomena to aid in modern health protocol. A detailed understanding of the behavior of pathogens after being released into the atmosphere can only be accomplished with an interdisciplinary application of physics principles. This video will investigate this connection between physics and airborne pathogen transmission in terms of 5 major concepts of physics: kinematics, Newton's laws of motion, momentum, thermodynamics, and electromagnetism. These tools work in tandem to not only describe the motion of particles of all sizes in air, but also environmental factors which affect their stability, and the physical principles involved in technologies that can be used to stop or minimize disease transmission, such as ventilation and ultraviolet sterilization. These findings further underscore the importance of airborne disease prevention and control is not purely a biological problem, but a fundamentally physical one as well, spanning the fields of mechanics, energy transfer, and electromagnetism to fully understand and manage the risks of airborne infection. Thousands of microscopic droplets are released into the air when someone talks, coughs, or sneezes. Sometimes these droplets can contain pathogens, which are bacteria, fungi, or viruses that can spread to other people through inhalation. Epidemiology and microbiology can explain the biological aspects of infection, but physics determines the travel of these particles. The basic forces and motions that control all matter in physics decide the path, velocity, energy, and settlement of these pathogens. In an article comparing aerosol concentrations and particle size distributions generated by singing, speaking, and breathing, the author states, numerous public health decisions like protective equipment, control strategies, communication to the public depend on quantitative estimates that aerosol scientists, in collaboration with medical community, are in the position to provide. We can gain a better understanding of how diseases spread through processes by incorporating physics, including forces, energy, and motion. Kinematics, Newton's laws, momentum, thermodynamics, and electromagnetism are the 5 concepts of physics that are examined in this paper, in order to explain the behavior of these pathogens. So let's keep those in mind as we move forward. Kinematics is the part of physics that deals with how the motion of an object happens without having to think about the forces that cause it. Notions surrounding kinematics include displacement, velocity, acceleration, and time, which are all important for figuring out how droplets that carry pathogens move after they are released from the body. Scientists can use kinematics equations to figure out how far a droplet will go before it stops moving. The motion is usually projectile. Air resistance slows the droplet down over time, while gravity constantly speeds it up. Small droplets act differently than larger droplets. With small droplets, the force of gravity is almost non-existent, and they can stay in the air for longer periods of time. On the other hand, droplets that are bigger fall to the ground quickly because they have a higher velocity. Climatic models can measure how environmental variables like humidity and air temperature affect droplet speed and range. In the article, Flow Dynamics of Droplets Expelled During Sneezing, in the context of physics of fluids, the author states, "These findings will enable the refinement of models and simulations of sneezes toward improving infection control guidelines. Calculating accurate distances and creating efficient ventilation systems that take particle motion dynamics into consideration requires this research for modern disease control." Newton's 3 laws of motion explain why motion happens, whereas kinematics described motion itself. The forces acting on airborne particles and how they react to interactions with their surroundings are governed by these principles. Newton's first law, which is the law of inertia, can be explained as unless an outside force acts upon an object in motion, it will continue to travel after exiting the mouth or nose until gravity or air resistance forces the particles to slow down and settle. In an article, Factors Involved in Aerosol Transmission of Infection and Control of Ventilation in Healthcare Premises, the author states, "To transmit from a respiratory tract of one person to another, the organisms in such droplets must remain airborne for a sufficient amount of time and must remain viable in a sufficient quantity to be inhaled by a susceptible host. This explains why still environments raise the risk of infection and why pathogen aerosols can travel great distances in that still air." Newton's second law can best be described by an object's acceleration is dependent upon the amount of force that is applied to it and its mass. This article, Science in Motion, Newton's Second Law of Motion, written for the Space Center of Houston. The equation for this force equals mass times acceleration. Larger droplets accelerate downward faster than smaller ones, which are more influenced by different air currents within an environment and have less to do with gravitational pull. Lastly, we have the third law, that there is an equal and opposite reaction for every action during exhalation. When air is expressed out of the lungs with force, it creates circular currents by pushing against the surrounding air. In an article, Airborne Spread of Infectious Agents in an Indoor Environment, the author states, "Typical airflows are turbulent and they are affected by many parameters, such as air distribution systems. Airflow systems are also subject to the third law when fans or vents are involved. They can produce counterflows that affect the movement of airborne pathogens. Newton's laws of motion emphasize that the motion of pathogens is governed by universal physical laws describing how forces act in microscopic particles in the same way that they do on macroscopic items." In physics, momentum equals mass times velocity. Stated in the article, The Physics of Descent and the Effects of Movement Momentum, written for Nature News. This is a type of conserved quantity, which means it can only be transferred rather than created. Momentum controls how droplets interact with surfaces and with each other. A droplet's momentum dictates whether it adheres, bounces, or disintegrates when it hits a surface, such as a wall, a mask fiber, human face, or another particle. This type of collision is inelastic. So when the droplet hits the surface it is moving towards, it will lose kinetic energy. Because masks and filters use momentum transfer and dissipation to trap particles, they can capture droplets with effectiveness. Knowing momentum can improve airflow control and protective gear from a public health perspective. By increasing the filtration efficiency, it allows for maximum absorption during these inelastic collisions. Taking a look at another concept. An airborne pathogen's fate is influenced by both its motion and the energy exchanges it undergoes. How long a pathogen can survive in air is largely determined by thermodynamics, which is the study of heat, energy, and work. Evaporation occurs as droplets move through the atmosphere and is controlled by the conservation of energy, which is the first law of thermodynamics. When droplets are evaporating, the heat in the surrounding atmosphere is what's used. With smaller droplets, when the temperature drops, it will evaporate, while larger droplets will take longer, but leaves behind droplet nuclei that are a concentrated pathogen material. With the nuclei being exposed, it is light enough to stay in the air for long stretches of time. Pathogen survival is also impacted by temperature and humidity. The degradation of biological molecules over time when an environment changes is explained by the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy or disorder tends to increase. In the article, Droplet Fate in Indoor Environments, or Can We Prevent the Spread of Infection?, the author states, viruses with lower lipid content have greater stability at high relative humidity than lipid-containing viruses. Viruses that possess a lipid envelope are more stable in dry air, whereas viruses without a protective envelope are more stable in moist air. Therefore, the equilibrium between pathogen degradation and droplet persistence is determined by the thermodynamic environment. Engineers can create environmental control systems that decrease airborne viability by understanding these concepts. The last physical principle that is essential to controlling airborne pathogens is electromagnetism, which controls how electric and magnetic fields behave and forms the basis of modern technology. Two crucial applications of electromagnetism in airborne pathogen research are electrostatic filtration and ultraviolet sterilization. In the article, Ultraviolet Irradiation and the Mechanisms Underlying Its Inactivation of Infectious Agents, written for Animal Health Research, the author states, in particular, wavelengths between 200 and 280 nanometers affect the double bond stability of adjacent carbon atoms and molecules. Thus, UV inactivation of microorganisms results from the formation of dimers in RNA and DNA. The interaction between photons and electrons provide an explanation for this process. By passing air through ultraviolet waves, airborne disinfection systems use this principle to lower pathogen concentrations without leaving behind chemical residues. Electrostatic filters have the forces generally coming from charged particles or charged collectors or both, or even from imposition of an electric field across the fabric. Stated in an article, Fibros, Electrostatics, and Filtration, a review of new technology. Airborne particles encounter attractive forces that draw them out of circulation by creating or sustaining electrostatic charges on filter fibers. Electromagnetism in physics not only clarifies the dynamic of airborne pathogens, but also offers effective intervention tools, turning theoretical concepts into workable public health solutions. A thorough understanding of the behavior of airborne pathogens can be attained by combining these 5 concepts with physics. Particle motion in air is explained by kinematics and Newton's laws. Interactions with surfaces are explained by momentum and collisions. Evaporation and survival are governed by thermodynamics. And electromagnetism is the foundation of modern control systems for airborne pathogens. In all of these fields, energy is the common factor. The study of energy in motion is at the heart of physics of airborne pathogens, whether it is electromagnetic energy breaking molecular bonds, thermal energy causing evaporation, or kinetic energy pushing droplets forward. This factor can be implicated in a real-life application. During COVID-19 pandemic, a decrease airborne transmission researchers redesigned public areas, hospitals, classrooms, among other places, using kinematics along with other models within physics. Standard healthcare settings were determined with electrostatic filtration systems and ultraviolet sterilizers. Scientists can predict and reduce a variety of airborne health risks by understanding the mechanics. Although airborne pathogens are invisible, they behave according to the same physical laws that govern matter all around us. We can uncover the hidden mechanics of disease transmission by combining the concepts of kinematics, Newton's laws of motion, momentum, thermodynamics, and electromagnetism. Incorporating all of these strategies shows that managing airborne illnesses is an exercise in applied physics rather than merely biology. Future studies must strengthen this interdisciplinary relationship as the globe continues to have airborne infectious threats. Our ability to create environments that safeguard human health improves with our growing understanding of the physics of airborne pathogens. Physics gives us the power to predict and furthermore regulate the invisible forces that shape the air that we breathe. Thanks for watching.